Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. In recent times, as we have had various different cast birthdays, I have done a segment that paid tribute and wished a happy birthday to those various different cast members. Well, I have a birthday, so I guess in a way this is like my happy birthday to myself kind of message. What the heck, I might as well cover a little bit about my life and career and my character on the Waltons and other aspects. If you are enjoying these various segments, please do hit like and subscribe. Going back to the beginning, I was born January 29th in Santa Monica, California. My mother is originally from England and my father is originally from Canada. My parents met when my father was with the Canadian Air Force and stationed in England, and they were married over there. They, for a short period of time, went to Canada, and then shortly before I was born, they moved down to California. So I am the first in my family to be born in the United States. So from an early age, I remember my mom, when she came to the U.S., and to California, she started studying voice and ended up getting a job singing with a big band and did a lot of different private parties and things like that as a singer with the band. So the voice teacher that she was studying with put together some little children's recitals as well. And I remember my brother, sister, and I all rehearsing little songs in our garage, and we took part in one of these children's recitals. So that was the first sort of performance work that I remember doing. And then my father enrolled my sister and I in dance classes. So I took ballet, tap, jazz, and then he also got my sister and I think maybe my brother too, an acting coach. So I did lessons with this acting coach. From there, it proceeded to him finding out about how to get an agent, how if he wanted his children to get involved in doing film and television work, how did that happen? So he started researching that and found out about how to get us an agent. Meanwhile, we'd also somehow come in contact with another producer who was doing children's theater. And my sister and I both ended up getting cast in a children's theater production of Cinderella. And it wasn't the sort of Rodgers and Hammerstein version that we've all are perhaps more familiar with. This was the basic story of Cinderella, but the music was an assortment of different songs to just fit the circumstances. And I remember, although I auditioned for the role of Cinderella, I did not get it. I think it was a combination of my singing not being strong enough at whatever age that was, 6, 7, and perhaps also that they wanted someone a little older to play that role. My sister got one of the roles as one of the mean stepsisters who were called Meanie and Greenie. And Greenie had green hair, like spray painted green hair, and Meanie had purple hair. And I was involved in that production on weekends for about a year. And right towards the end, I got to be upgraded from being a countess at the ball, which was a very minimal role, plus getting to sing, the chorus on a number of the songs. And right towards the end, I did get to do a few performances as Greenie. So that was my big break into doing theater. For the most part, I had a pretty normal childhood. I went to public school and I was involved in various different sports at school and things like that. And I did start auditioning. I did some background work in commercials and film and television, and then started getting roles here and there. One of my first ones was in the movie of Hotel. And then I did guest spots, little bits in shows like the Tammy Grimes Show and Felony Squad and a few other things. So those were my humble beginnings. Then when I was 13, of course, I went to audition for the role of Mary Ellen in The Homecoming. And despite however many young girls that I always auditioned up against, I managed to land that role because at that point in time, I was pretty darn perfect for it. I was a tomboy. I was 13, as the role also called for, and I sort of had that vibe going. I remember going in because she was a country girl. My idea was I had my hair in pigtails, and I went in barefoot with short shorts on. Not that that was Mary Ellen's look in the Homecoming or in the 1930s, but that and the combination of what I did in the audition, which was the scene of cracking walnuts in the barn. I was fortunate enough to be cast, which then the next year led into, of course, 9 seasons of The Waltons. Right around the time I was cast in The Homecoming, I had also been lucky enough to get involved in a theater repertory company. It was an adult company, and I was one of the only children in the company. My sister was in the company for a while, too. This came off of an audition I had done for a production of Wait Until Dark. There's a little girl who lives upstairs in that play, and I auditioned. I did not get the role, but there was another actor-director who was there at that audition who somehow saw me or heard of me, or he heard that they were doing the audition. Anyway, he was also doing a production and invited me to do his production, which I did. And then he was running this this repertory theater company. And so I was invited to join that. And so for a couple of years, I did theater with his company. So that was great. He did a combination of acting classes and then theater productions. So I did that. So by the time I started doing The Homecoming and The Waltons, I already had some experience, some acting lessons, and some experience having performed both on camera and also on stage, which was a great training background. I was thinking back to some of my favorite scenes or episodes that I got to do that really kind of focused on Mary Ellen, or where I had prominent things to do. Of course, in The Homecoming, I'd say my favorite scenes were when we were putting the decorations on the tree, and when I got to kind of pick on the other kids and tell Aaron to turn blue and called them all a bunch of pissants, and which I thought was pretty funny, and didn't think anything of it at the time, but I just thought it was fun. And then I also enjoyed the scene outside of the store when in the evening when we went to try and get gifts from the missionary lady, and I was supplying all the various different children with Bible verses in exchange for gifts. So I kind of enjoyed that. I always enjoyed scenes where I had some degree of bantering with Richard Thomas, with John Boy. I just loved the dynamic between Mary Ellen and John Boy. So beyond then The Homecoming, in the episode The Hunt, which was really the first one we filmed, but not the first one that aired, I really enjoyed Mary Ellen's scenes bartering with the junk man. That was one of my favorite scenes, when I make all kinds of deals with him and get an extra thing for Elizabeth. And so I loved Mary Ellen's kind of wheeling and dealing there. So that was fun to me, and sort of that subplot of between when there was like the catcher's mitt and then the dress, and she couldn't make up her mind. So some of those early episodes were a lot of fun for me. Then I really liked the episode The Awakening, and really it was kind of one of the first times we saw Mary Ellen as a little bit more mature, that she was growing up a bit and becoming a young lady. And so that scene in the lake, which I thought was beautifully shot, and it was my first sort of grown-up romance on camera. So that always stood out to me. So that episode, and then in the quilting, her conflict with Grandma, and then the whole scene between John Boy and Mary Ellen in the attic when he finally convinces her that she needs to participate in this quilting and not just make it all about, her feelings about it, that Grandma put a lot of work into this. So that episode stood out for me. The episode The Nurse was also another one. That's probably one of my favorite episodes for Mary Ellen and for my character and what was going on. I felt she really grew up in that episode. One of my favorite scenes in that was a scene between me and the young girl who lost her mother, who I had been nursing. And I just felt it was a very sort of grown-up scene where Mary Ellen's just talking to her and has some just instinctive sense of the conversation, the honest conversation she has with this young girl who's just lost her mother. So that, to me, yes, I really was happy with how that scene played out. So that episode, and then the wedding. The wedding was a lot of fun just overall as an episode. It was a big deal for me, for my character who was engaged to David Spencer. I always loved working with Bob Woods. And then, here comes this other handsome man. So I've got these two men, who wouldn't want to have two handsome, talented men, sort of vying for your attention. So I enjoyed the filming of that episode, and I loved the relationships between her and David, and then between her and Kurt. I thought they did a good job of creating that dynamic. And the bantering scenes with Kurt were a lot like my former bantering scenes with John Boy, but then of course it took a more serious note when it became romantic. But I liked those scenes with Kurt as well. And then along the way, doing the series, there were all kinds of The Wager. The Wager was a lot of fun because I got to go to work all day and ride horses. So those were some of my standout episodes along the way. Outside of the actual filming, there were other things that I was doing during that time. That was because of someone I worked with. I started riding and jumping horses, so that became a lifelong passion that I still am involved in. I also started taking singing lessons, which then turned into my career in terms of doing musical theater and then doing concert work and recording CDs. So it was a really pivotal time in my life. After the series ended, I did go on to do more guest spots in television and started doing a lot of theater. I did musical theater. I did Cinderella as Cinderella. Then in shows like Sound of Music and Annie Get Your Gun and various different other musical and non-musical shows. Then I had the opportunity to start working behind the scenes and writing and directing for theater, and worked with a theater company in Canada for 8 years, writing and directing. And that was really a wonderful, wonderful education. And then during my time in Vancouver, I also had a chance to work on film and television projects up there. Some of the standouts being the series Stargate SG-1, where I got to play an alien, which I thought was fun, and go through the Stargate, which was very exciting. And Millennium, the series Ed, and then I had a really fun recurring role on a series, Showtime series called Beggars and Choosers. So those were fun times up in Canada. And then I remarried my current husband, Bob, in 2002, and moved back to California. And my son was born up in Canada. So then while he was young, I also had the opportunity to start working with Texas Family Musicals down in Texas. And again, it was a mix of, I joined their artistic team. I did some acting down there. I did some concerts. I wrote shows. I directed shows. So that was, I had a wonderful time working with that company as well. Just learned so much. And then sports have continued to be a part of my life over the years. Of course, some of that early on. Some of you have seen me on the Battle of the Network Stars that I did, or Circus of the Stars, where I learned to do wing walking and skydiving, which skydiving I continued to do for like 10 years until I was pregnant with my son. Was involved in 2 world records in skydiving. I also trained with roller derby teams. I did flying trapeze for circus, and still continue to do things like I did some celebrity tennis tournaments, skiing events, golf, none of which I'm great at, but with celebrity ones, you're basically just there to be a personality and help raise money. So that was fine. So sports have always been kind of one of my other hobbies and my away from work enjoyments. And the horses is the thing that I still continue to engage in very regularly. So that's like the overview of my life in this short, brief here I am to this point in my life. And of course, you all know about my YouTube channel, which I started a little over 4 years ago. And that has been a lot of fun for me, and I think a lot of fun for you too. Thank you very much for all of the wonderful birthday wishes you have sent my way. And I am enjoying a wonderful birthday this year. And I like to think that getting older is sort of like a fine wine that we get better with age. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. So thanks for joining me for this little birthday celebration. And I will be back with more behind the scenes of the Waltons, more Ask Judy, and I have some special guests that I'm trying to hook up with, and hope to be able to do that sometime soon. So those then will start rolling out again as well. Thanks for watching.